Now, adding bigger tires to your Jeep can add a lot of stresses to other components. The power steering is just one of them. You know how it is. You throw 35s on your Jeep and you notice the power steering's a little slower. Throw 37s on and it can be downright sluggish as you're trying to crawl through your favorite trails. Now, there is a new product out there to help those JL and JT owners who are noticing those problems, and that's the Apex Performance Power Steering Boost Valve Kit. This little boost valve replaces the factory pressure valve in your electric power steering pump. It allows you to adjust that pressure up to help bring some of the performance back. Now, this is the first one that we've installed, so let's get this JL into the studio and see what it takes. The Apex Boost Valve is easy to install in the pump once you get it out of the vehicle. For our guinea pig, we're going to use this 2018 JL. Now, this is the very first JL that Northridge 4x4 purchased back in early 2018. It has just under 50,000 miles on the clock and it sees a lot of use. It has 37s on it for day-to-day driving and gets a set of 40s for the bigger trails. So let's tear into this system and see what kind of improvement we can get. Now we need to get to the power steering pump, and that's down here behind the fender liner. So we need to remove the passenger side front fender. To do that, we have 4 screws up underneath, a Christmas tree clip up in the corner, and then we're just going to grab it and pull. There we go. And unplug the marker lights. Now, one of the things you want to make sure of, you have extra of these clips. It looks like we broke 4 of them this time around. Next up is to get the air box out. This one here has a S&B filters box, but it's very similar to stock. Now this is the factory breather tube. We need to pull this out. To do so, we've got to get the grill off, and to get the grill off, we've got to pull the winch and bumper. Seems like a lot of work, but we've got to get to these 2 screws right here. Now with those 2 screws out, we'll grab a hold of our air horn and wiggle it out. And now we can get at the electro-hydraulic power steering pump. Now we've got to get this pump up and out. So let's start by popping off this junction right here. And we'll just take an old toothbrush and clean up the dust around it. And there we go, we do got some fluid coming out, but by keeping our reservoir down low, we can probably keep that to a minimum. Now just kind of move the pump out of the way the best you can. And pop these little grommets out. And we need to do a little drilling and cutting on this bracket. Now for this bracket, we need to do a little trimming. I'm gonna come right down here. Okay, now if we want to keep rotating this pump, then we're going to use a 5mm hex key. And here is the factory pressure valve. Now this is the factory assembly. So we have our body, and then the pressure spring, and then the little seat. The new Apex boost valve uses a larger, stiffer spring, and this is what's going to allow us to get higher pressure. And in the end of the valve, we can actually screw in or unscrew to adjust our final pressure. So the Apex valve, and then we're going to throw the spring in, and then we're going to reuse that factory seat. This will screw right back into the same port. Now we want to make sure we throw a little power steering fluid on this O-ring and even on the threads. Now to hold this whole assembly together, we're going to use a little Lubriplate 105. You can use any lightweight grease. We can slide the new boost valve down inside the pump. We can just twist everything back up. The Apex system is adjustable. They include an oil-filled gauge, a high-pressure hose, and the sandwich adapter. We're going to take our high-pressure gauge and throw a wrap or two of Teflon tape around it. And the other side, we're going to screw right into our sandwich adapter. Make sure that your O-rings are lubricated. We can press the sandwich adapter down in. Then in goes the factory high pressure line. And now we can stick our pump back in its brackets. All right, now we can just start putting it all back together and we can go try it out. No, we can't. We need to get that awesome cooler in, because remember, this boost is gonna create a little bit more heat. Especially on the hot days, it's gonna create a lot more heat. So we definitely gotta add in that Apex cooler. Now the new Apex cooler is gonna set right down in here, but it's gonna be super tight because we have our winch, our bumper and a winch. We have our grill that comes down. This is the return line, the power steering return line, and this is what we're gonna cut and splice into, but we're gonna splice into it further up. So we'll start by just cutting out the center section, then we can cut the two legs off. And then we'll see exactly where we can get this thing to fit. Now on the driver's side, this is the return line here, and it goes right up and into the steering box. And we need to cut it as close to this fitting as we can get. Now you can use a utility knife, anything like that. We got these cutters here. You can get these online for about 20 bucks. Now this is the return line coming here to the bottom of the pump. We need to remove that. And reach up in here and grab that hose. And start wiggling, there we go. Just be ready to catch some fluid. So let's talk cooler placement. A lot of it's going to depend on what bumper and winch combination you're running, but it's going to sit up in here between the frame rails. And we do get into a problem if you have a Rubicon model with the electronic sway bar, is you have this mount right here. Now if you have a low set winch sits down inside the frame rails, that cooler is going to hit here between your grill and this mount. Apex actually gives you a dimension of what you want to bend this bracket down to make everything clear. With our LOD front bumper, it sits on top and our winch sits up high. So we should be able to be just fine running our cooler right here, and we can run it right between these two factory bolts, and then the bumper will come down, and then the extra skid plate will give us plenty of protection. So let's pull these bumper plate bolts out. Install our nipples. We're just going to go to 100 inch-pounds. So the second nipple is going to screw in here, but the way this cooler sets in there, we're going to actually have to install the nipple through this slot in the bracket. Ooh, we're right into this little doohickey. Now we're going to take the Apex supplied barb, throw a little lube on there, slide it right into the supplied hose. One of the clamps on. I'm going to reach up here. Clamp into place. I'll slide that barb right in. There we go. Don't run your hose tight. Make sure you leave a little bit for flex and movement. And again, make sure you have plenty of length on your hose. It is tight. So now it's time for our bleed and fill. We lost that power steering fluid when we cut the lines to install the cooler, and the new cooler is also going to add 150% more capacity, almost a full quart more than the factory system. Speaking of a factory system, we want to make sure we're going to use a high quality, pure grade synthetic oil, so you can use the Mopar power steering fluid. Redline makes one. We found this at our local auto parts store. This is Pentosin CHF 11S, and it is a pure grade synthetic power steering fluid. Then once you get a little fluid in, you want to have a helper behind the wheel, and we're going to turn the steering wheel from left to right. We're only going to go about a half turn to the left, half turn to the right. We're going to do that back and forth. That's going to work the fluid from the reservoir down into the pump and start bleeding the system. And stop there, go back the other way. Keep going, keep going. Add more fluid. Once the bubbles stop, we want to start the engine. We're going to run it for about 30 seconds and then shut it back off. Okay, so put your foot on the brake. Push the start. Now we did this with the tires in the air, so you can do this in your driveway on jack stands. And you just don't want that extra force of the tires and the vehicle weight on the ground. You want to have those tires up in the air, go left and right to bleed everything. Now that we've got all the air bubbles out, we've even ran it and gone lock to lock, we're ready to put it on the ground. We can check that pressure gauge and then set our pressures. Now it's time to check our pressure and start boosting it. So have your assistant start the vehicle up, and then you want them to turn the tire all the way to the right-hand side, full lock, and hold it at full lock. And as we look here at full lock under full pressure, we're doing just over 500 PSI. Stock is up over 1,000, so we want to make our first adjustments. Go ahead and shut it down. So you're not going to make any of these adjustments while the engine's running. We have to have it off. And then it's time to go underneath the vehicle. And put it back to full lock again. And there we picked up just a little bit of pressure. So let's shut it off and adjust again. Okay, go ahead and fire it up. And look at that, there we go, right there in between the green. So let's call that good. That's crazy. I mean, all we did is put that little valve in, make some adjustments, and it steers these 37s like nothing. So let's get out on the highway and see what it feels like. Okay, so just the parking lot. It's super easy, very light. Go down here and okay, so she definitely stiffens up. That's the computer dropping pressures down as it senses speed. So you don't want to have that oversensitive pressure at speed. That would be really dangerous. Okay, she's nice and stiff at freeway speeds, which is awesome. All right, so let's just see if we can tell where that steering all of a sudden breaks loose at. So it's a little easier in the 30s. Right there, about 20 miles an hour. It's almost hard to tell. It just gets progressively easier. Just under 10 miles an hour, it feels just super sensitive, like you could turn 40s. This is crazy good. Now, if we were to stop right here, we put it just in park, and one finger steering. Yeah, look at the muscle in that. Oh yeah. That's that's crazy to be able to turn 37s like that, and all we did was put that little boost valve in on the factory electronic steering pump. Wow, that is a huge improvement. I mean, one finger steering, 37s on dry pavement. That's, well, impressive. Now we still have a gauge hanging there, so let's go over, talk about the gauge, and then get that gauge up and out of the way. Now about the gauge markings, you see the 1000 PSI. Factory is going to be right about 1300. And then we're going to get into this green zone. This is what Apex has deemed as good. So we're right in that center. It steers plenty good. I actually wouldn't want it any more sensitive. But if you have different tires, wider tires, taller tires, you might work your way up to that 2000 mark. Just be careful. Once you get into the yellow, that's the caution area. And red, things are gonna start to break. So we really recommend that you stay right in that green zone. Now to store this away, we can just tuck it up here behind the grill and then run a zip tie in there. And then goes our Christmas tree clip. Now, if you've installed bigger tires on your Wrangler JL or Gladiator JT, we strongly encourage you to take a closer look at the Apex Performance Products Power Steering Boost Valve Kit. It's going to bring some performance back to your factory power steering and help you steer those bigger tires much easier. Now, of course, we have them here at Northridge 4x4. Check the description box down below for a link to where you can get one for your Jeep. Thanks for watching our video. We'll see you in the next one.